Matchroom Boxing and Eddie Hearn are absolute wankers. They're up Canelo Alvarez's ring piece a million miles. Look on the fucking webpage. All Canelo, Canelo. Do you promote Billie Joe? I know you little prick.
Those are the words of Tyson the Gypsy King Fury as he blasts Eddie Hearn for accusing this man of promoting Canelo Alvarez more or better than Billie Joe Saunders. You know, when Billie Joe left Queensberry, when he left Frank Warren, he came over to Eddie Hearn and he said how good it was. He said that actually before then, you know, when Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren worked together to put together the Billie Joe Saunders and Andrade fight, Billie Joe was saying how good and smooth it was, you know, and he said he actually liked it, you know, and then eventually ended up coming over. I think it was the better part of early last year, or was it late 19? And Billie Joe's been with him ever since. Now, the new wave of success has happened for Matchroom because Canelo Alvarez, despite working with Canelo Alvarez when he was with Golden Boy, Canelo decided to work with Eddie Hearn for 2 fights. And the 2 fights were the Durham fight, which has already happened. He stopped Durham, I think, in 3 or 4. And now the Billie Joe Saunders fight. And now Billie Joe has said that, hey, he doesn't really care for the favoritism. You know, he didn't care for the favoritism when it came to the judges, and that was going to be one of the selling points for the fight. And he didn't care for all of the overlooking of Canelo fighting other opponents as though he was just going to be this guy that was going to get beat just like all the other guys, you know. And I understand Billie Joe, because I think Billie Joe was caught in a situation where he wanted to fight, but he wasn't going to take it under any circumstances. And the circumstances that allowed this fight to happen was some type of balance of judges, because that's what you're dealing with when you're dealing with Canelo Alvarez. Billie Joe Saunders is a very good fighter. So was Erislandy Lara. Okay, so let's just call it what it is. I think that those guys were, and I believe Billie Joe will be a real big problem for Canelo. And if he doesn't, I will be very, very surprised. But Billie Joe did not want to put everything on the line just to fight a fight that's unfair. And I think this is where it's going, because now what was promised to Billie Joe obviously is not promised to Billie Joe, because the powers that be are not allowing any type of, all the judges will be picked a certain way. When you're dealing with people like Canelo, a powerful entity in the sport of boxing, probably one of the highest paid, you know. If he's not the highest paid, he's one of them, okay? And he's definitely the most talented, but the politics behind Canelo Alvarez was always the problem with me. And now it seems to be an overlaying problem for everyone else. But Tyson Fury comes in, being Tyson Fury, because Tyson Fury's not with Matchroom, okay? He's not bound by Eddie Hearn or any kind of capacity, okay? So he spoke his mind, and I think Tyson Fury was a mouthpiece for Billie Joe. Don't get me wrong, Billie Joe has his own mouthpiece, but he can't do it better than Tyson the Gypsy King Fury, because Tyson Fury will tell people how he thinks, what he thinks, you know, at that given moment, okay? And this is no exception. You know, Tyson Fury is that guy that shows you the way it is. Now, is Eddie Hearn, though, favoring Canelo? I think Eddie Hearn should really look at the judges and really fight for both sides equally. Okay, it shouldn't be like, okay, hey, We need these judges, Eddie, and we don't want a British judge. And if he says okay, no, it should be some ruckus back and forth because he promotes both. And that's the problem. Okay? Monopoly. I'm telling you. Because what happens when Eddie Hearn, if Billie Joe wins, and then you have to scramble together to get a fight made for him and Caleb Plant when Canelo loses, it's going to look real funny because you didn't even have that in preparation because you were favoring one fighter over the other one to win, and it didn't really matter to him because he was promoting both fighters. Okay, so that's one of the problems with Eddie Hearn now. I think he should really remember that Billie Joe Saunders was with him first. And even though he's not a Canelo and everything like that, but at the end of the day, you don't know who will beat who. We learned that with Andy Ruiz. Bob Arum learned that. Andy Ruiz was a nobody. He wasn't this, he wasn't that. He was written off like a bad check until he beat Joshua. Now everybody was looking at Andy in a totally different light now, weren't they? Okay. Billie Joe may be that guy. Just because Billie Joe, hadn't fought those top guys, and he had a couple rough fights with guys that are some flat performances, but doesn't mean he can't give Canelo Alvarez problems. But the problem lies in with the judges. I think Eddie Hearn should do something to ensure that Billie Joe Saunders is just as promoted as Canelo Alvarez. Okay, and not just another Canelo Alvarez opponent, especially him being a British promoter with a British fighter. I know you're supposed to promote both, but it has to be a certain type of way you go about doing it. So I think that Eddie Hearn, instead of talking, because he's a great talker, at the end of the day, Eddie Hearn can talk, you out of the ballpark. But I think it takes now some action. Like, hey, we do demand British judges. We do demand this. We do demand that. Okay, and I think that's only rare. At least something has to give as far as the judges. Because, yeah, there's no British media allowed there, which is weird. Okay, there's no judge there, which was agreed. See, these things are agreed about, I think, that the contract, it should have stated in the contract, like, hey, it has to be a British judge and an outside judge and then an American judge. Or a Mexican judge, a British judge, and a judge from somewhere else. Not from really America because he's from the Southwest. You know what I'm saying? So he could still be, compromised to a certain degree. Not saying it couldn't in all these other places, but, more than likely that wouldn't happen if you just bring a random guy over. But anyway, Tyson Fury was basically speaking up for his fellow traveler friend, a good friend of his. And if Tyson Fury hears anything negative on the other side, he's coming to say what's on his mind. And that's exactly what he said. So you guys tell me what you think about Tyson Fury telling Eddie Hearn you're a wanker and you're up Canelo's you know what. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.